Hi, this is How I See It. We all know that Saudi Arabia funds terrorists. This story is from October of last year. Saudi Arabia is the world's largest source of funds for Islamist militant groups such as Afghan Taliban and Lashkar-e-Taiba, but the Saudi government is reluctant to stem the flow of money, according to Hillary Clinton. Well, you can't believe anything Hillary Clinton says.
On Wednesday, Barack Obama and the US Defense Secretary will be discussing anti-terrorism efforts with Saudi Arabia's top officials. But Obama's trip comes at a time when voices within the US are growing louder. They're demanding the release of a classified 9/11 report. Those pages reportedly reveal more on Saudi Arabia's involvement in the attacks, which were mostly carried out by Saudi nationals. One of the co-authors of the initial congressional report says the pages point to those who supported the attackers.
I believe that support came from Saudi Arabia.
Substantially.
And when we say the Saudis, you mean the government, rich people in the country, charities?
All of the above.
Obama has said that it's up to the Director of National Intelligence to decide whether it's safe to release the information in question.
This has been a process which we generally deal with through the intelligence community, and Jim Clapper, our Director of National Intelligence, has been going through to make sure that whatever it is that is released is not going to compromise some major national security interest of the United States.
This man is covering up 9/11 truth. And I didn't say he's covering up for the Saudis, because the truth about 9/11 doesn't just point a finger at Saudi Arabia. We all know Saudi Arabia is involved. But so is the United States. Because first and foremost, the United States of America is responsible for 9/11. And this man you see in front of you is covering it up. Okay. 15 of the hijackers were Saudi Arabians. There were 19 total. And yet we went and attacked Iraq. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? How the United States covered up Saudi Arabia's role in 9/11. Actually, the kingdom's involvement was deliberately covered up at the highest levels of U.S. government, and the cover-up goes beyond locking up 28 pages of the Saudi report in a vault in the U.S. Capitol basement. Investigations were throttled. Co-conspirators were let off the hook. This man you see before you died 2 months after 9/11. Osama bin Laden did not pull off 9/11. You can go online and look up his death notice. SEAL Team 6 did not kill him. That was a staged fraud to make you think that America is fabulous and that the government is doing its job in catching terrorists. If they were going to catch terrorists, they'd lock themselves up in prison. This is a document from WikiLeaks. Saudi Arabia background. While the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia takes seriously the threat of terrorism within Saudi Arabia, it has been an ongoing challenge to persuade Saudi officials to treat terrorist financing emanating from Saudi Arabia as a strategic priority, due in part to intense focus by the USG over the past several years. Saudi Arabia has begun to make important progress on this front and has responded to terrorist financing concerns raised by the United States through proactively investigating and detaining financial facilitators of concern. Still, donors in Saudi Arabia constitute the most significant source of funding to Sunni terrorist groups worldwide. Continued senior-level USG engagement is needed to build on initial efforts and encourage the Saudi government to take more steps to stem the flow of funds from Saudi Arabia-based sources to terrorists and extremists worldwide. So it is not any secret that Saudi Arabia funds terrorists. Saudi Arabia continues to fund terrorism while the U.S. does nothing about it. This is a story from last year. Why does the United States do nothing about it? Because pointing the finger at Saudi Arabia is like pointing the finger at itself. Oh, and let's not forget that Israel is involved in all of this too. And when I say all of this, I mean 9/11. Senator says he may back bill exposing Saudis to 9/11 lawsuits. A bill opposed by the Obama administration that would expose Saudi Arabia to legal jeopardy for any role in the September 11 attacks appeared to gain momentum on Tuesday when the senator holding it up said he would be open to supporting it. Obama is opposing this bill. He is covering up 9/11 truth. He does not want anybody to know who is responsible for 9/11. You're supposed to just keep continuing to believe in the fairy tale story that they have put through on mainstream media whore networks. So, Saudi Arabia is blackmailing the United States of America Corporation, threatening to dump $750 billion in Treasury holdings. Now, I know a dear friend of mine thinks that the 28 pages could be a psyop. It could be that little carrot they dangle in front of you, all the truthers. Oh, here you go, we've got this might come out. Yeah, this might be what you're waiting for. And it might very well be that. Also, it might very well be full of proof, positive, that Saudi Arabia funded terrorists. What it actually will reveal isn't that Saudi Arabia funded Osama bin Laden, because Osama bin Laden did not pull off 9/11. It would most likely outline the United States' own involvement, along with Israel. That's my own personal thought. Because if one of these people go down, they're taking them all down. And $750 billion in Treasury holdings being dumped constitutes the collapse of the economy, which I've been reporting about, as have many people have been doing, trying to wake you up and let you know that it's actually happening right now. So, could the whole 28 pages have been created to eventually threaten Saudi Arabia while knowing they would dump our treasuries and create an economic collapse that they already know is inescapable? I've told you before, the United States government is not going to take responsibility for anything. Their rich old bankers in their castles are not going to be blameworthy for anything. They are the people who actually rewrite history over and over again and have been doing it for centuries. Most things you know about our history are absolutely false and glorified. That's a very deep rabbit hole that is quite eye-opening. So, in short, I'm reading down here on the bottom. Whether due to the Saudi threat or just because of its default position in the matter, Obama will block the bill and no further probes into Saudi involvement in the September 11 tragedy will be allowed. And with that, any concerns about whether the U.S. president represents not only the interests of the September 11 victims and their families, but all American people, and is intent on discovering who the real culprit behind the deadliest terror attack on U.S. soil, as opposed to the interests of few Saudi billionaires, and would much rather have the truth remain suppressed in 28 top-secret pages and certainly in the public domain, were just answered. In other words, Obama, the puppet of the bankers, does not care about you. He does not care about the people who plummeted to their death out of those buildings or who were crushed inside them. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about your children. He doesn't care about anything but his own position of power. He cares about the Saudi Arabians, who have the exact same interests as him. They're in a great big club, and as I've said, quoting George Carlin, you're not part of it. The ISIS Islamic terrorists are supported by the US, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. There's a truth right there. Great big bomb of it. I'm showing this article also because it's interesting that this is a mainstream media rag, the New York Times, propaganda rag, using the words economic fallout. And this one, US dollar collapse. So I'm starting to see the language change a little bit. And getting more truthful. That's how they do it. It's like the bail-ins. The Dodd-Frank Act is in place. The banks can bail themselves in, which means they'll steal your money if a collapse happens. Your money will just vanish. A percentage of it, half of it, I don't know, but your money will be gone to support the banks which caused the collapse in the first place. This has already happened in Austria.
U.S. Government Unaccountability Office just announced that debt was hitting levels not seen since the end of World War II, stating, "We're going to owe more than our entire economy is producing, and by definition, this is not sustainable," the auditor pointed out in a congressional hearing. The idea, of course, is that such warnings should result in immediate action to rectify problems, but that's not going to happen. These problems are not going to end. It's just a question of how long it's going to take before they take down the world's economic system in a way that cannot be fixed. It's not happening by happenstance either. That's something people have a great deal of difficulty comprehending. But these are disasters that the banksters have been planning in detail for the past 50 years. Even US investors are starting to get the picture. The Dow was up 150 points on Monday before going negative by the close. What was up by the end of the day? Gold and silver. People aren't total fools. As fiat paper fails, they start to buy metals again. Every bad thing imaginable is in motion now and getting worse. As planned, and please understand it is planned, the world's economy is becoming unglued and fast. The spectacle has begun in earnest as they rush around the world frenetically shouting about what must be done. But nothing can be done. Nothing is supposed to be done. Oh, some of them may actually believe it, but the people at the top, the ones who put the current global central banking economy into play, know better. And those are the same people who used Shemitah and now the Jubilee year as a timeline for the implosion of the economic world in 2016. The one I've analyzed and often write about. If you want to know more about that, you can go to surviveshemitah.com and look at my most recent video on Jubilee 2016, in which I clearly state that 2016 is the year that the globalists have chosen to pull the plug.
Okay? He's not the only person saying that. Now, if you're one of those people out there who are saying, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, the United States government would never have anything to do with 9/11, maybe you don't know about this little building here. This is World Trade Center building number 7, which collapsed on 9/11 at 5:20 p.m. And you didn't know about it, did you? Oh sure, a lot of my subscribers know all about this. This is the smoking gun of 9/11. This building was not hit by a plane, and its free fall collapse in 6 seconds is absolutely impossible without controlled demolition. Towers 1 and 2 are also obvious controlled demolitions. And this building here collapsed, as you see here, from controlled demolition. Buildings don't collapse symmetrically at free fall speed without the internal supports being removed simultaneously. This is common sense. 3 buildings collapsed on 9/11, they say, from fire, and yet buildings have never, throughout history, ever, not even once, collapsed from fire globally at free fall speed before or after 9/11.